And I'd also like to say welcome to Braille Literacy Month. So it's very appropriate that we have Greg with us today. Here's a quote from Louis Braille that says, access to communication is access to knowledge. So again, Greg Stilson with the American Printing House for the Blind. He is head of global innovations. And for those of you who don't know American Printing House for the Blind, ever since I was in grade school, since I started reading books, I've always seen the name the American Printing House because they printed and provided all sorts of curricular materials for schools and still do, and it's a huge presence in the blindness community. One of the big projects that Greg is working on is the Monarch Tactile Tablet, and I'm sure that he will share more information with us throughout this webinar. So, welcome, Greg. First
Awesome.
question.
Thanks, Dave.
Please begin by telling a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
What your job title is, what your job involves, and how long you worked there.
Sure. So I am. I live here in Madison. I've been with the American Printing House for the Blind. It's crazy. LinkedIn told me it's been 4 years now. These past 4 years have absolutely flown by. And I've generally, so just to kind of recap a little bit, so I'm a blind person myself. I grew up in Madison, graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater with an information technology degree and had absolutely no intention of working in the assistive technology or the blindness field at all. So I got my degree. I expected to kind of be one of the information tech IT people that work in your those server rooms, and I was expecting to be the guy that would take away your permissions or add your permissions or get your printer up and running or that kind of stuff, right? Dabble into a little bit of security stuff. And then I worked at a blindness training center in Minneapolis for a couple of years. I taught technology, which was enough time for me to realize that I was not a teacher, and ended up getting a job at Humanware doing remote technical support. And so I was living up in Minneapolis, and it was one of those opportunities that kind of sprung up that I was like, wow, Minneapolis is really cold and I don't have to wait for a bus for 30 minutes. And so I ended up getting a remote tech support position with Humanware way back in 2006. And ended up working there for better part of 12, 13 years. Really doing a number of things. I started, as I said, working remote before it was cool to work remote, and so I've been remote ever since 2006, which is kind of crazy to think of, but it's one of these things where in 2020, when everybody kind of was forced to go remote, that was one of those moments where this was not new to me, and it is a challenge to work remotely, as I'm sure many of you who've had to do it experienced. It's a totally different kind of mindset that you have to put yourself in, and I spent the better part of the last 20 years almost really honing my ability to stay focused and to kind of get my home in a situation where I could work remotely. And so worked at Humanware for, like I said, almost 13 years. I did a number of things there, from technical support to product sales. I did the most time there doing presentations and workshops. So I would go to a school district. We would be let's say the school district had bought a bunch of Braille notes or things like that, and I would teach teachers how to teach those Braille notes or some features on those things and stuff of that nature. And while I was doing that, it really got me interested into the product development life cycle and how products are actually designed and created. And that's kind of what led me into my current career, which is that of product management. So I've been privileged enough to have been working in the AT space now for a long time, and if I had been able to really have my hand in the development of several products, really from the ground up, and as a blind person developing products for blind people, it's a really awesome opportunity that I don't take for granted. So today at APH, I run a team of about 15 people, from technical product managers to software engineers to quality assurance analysts. And we really are focused on the education technology that hopefully many of our teachers and students are going to be using in the future. So that's generally kind of what I do.
Great, thank you. I'm going to skip the next question because I think you already answered it. It was, can you explain the path that led you to this job?
Before you jump to that, Dave, one position that I held in between Humanware and APH, and it's one that I look back on so fondly, is, when you work at a company for 12 years, right? In your brain, that's kind of how things are done. That's just how products are developed, or that's how technical support is run, or that's how, that's just how things work. And in 2017, I made a jump, and I took a role as VP of product at AIRA, which many of you may use. It's a remote visual interpreter application that basically allows a blind person to call in. A sighted agent can see through their phone camera and see what they see, along with a whole bunch of other telemetry data that comes through, so that the agent knows where you are and where your location is, what you're doing, all that kind of stuff that allows them to give better contextual information. And that was an opportunity that I took on, and it was a huge, not a risk, but it was I went from an established company to a startup. And what was incredible about that is it really gave me a completely different perspective on how products are designed, especially in a startup world where things move quickly. Things move really, really fast, because you get in the startup world, you get investments from investors, and you need to turn those investments into results as quickly as possible. And so that was an opportunity where I had a chance to work with incredibly talented software engineers. I learned how graphic designers really worked. I learned how to integrate a lot of the visual and non-visual pieces together, and work with some software tools that I had never worked with before as a blind person. And so it really gave me an entirely new perspective of sort of how not that Humanware is kind of traditional, but it was one of those things where they're a more long-standing traditional entity, and then how a startup kind of on the flip side does things. And it was a really exciting opportunity. I worked there from 2017 to 2020, and really had a chance to do some cool things there too. So
Nice. Please share some of the greatest rewards and challenges to your job.
The greatest reward, honestly, and whenever I interview folks, like, sneak peek, if you're ever interviewing for a job with me, the answer I'm looking for to that question is, what is the greatest reward you can see? It's ultimately seeing a product that you developed or had a hand in developing actually being used by a student in the classroom. And to me, that is to date the greatest reward that I get to see, and I get to see it a lot. I'm in a privileged situation where not only do I manage people, but I get out and I actually get into classrooms or I get into conferences and I get to see and work with the students that are using the products that we developed, and that's not lost on me. It's a situation where I get to actually speak to our users directly and get a sense of what is working well and what could we have done better, and see that sort of live and in person. And so to me, that is by far the greatest um, reward that I get to see on a monthly basis, probably is being able to go out and go see a kid using a piece of technology that we developed, an app we developed, a tool that we developed, and actually see them being successful with it. So from a reward perspective, that's very easy to answer. Challenges, there's a number of challenges, right? Software engineers, every software engineer is different, working with different personalities, different people, create different challenges. I think one of the being in the assistive technology space, we're at this crossroads now, especially with AI and the mainstream technology moving so quickly, and us in the AT world being so closely tied to the mainstream. The speed at which the mainstream technology is moving and the AI landscape is moving is a massive challenge for our space, because if we're building upon that technology, the chips, the things that we're dependent on, they change, they move very quickly, and for us to keep up with that can be a significant challenge, especially being in such a niche market like we are, where when you work with the Apples or the Googles or the Samsungs or the whatever of the world, they're purchasing in tens of millions of devices, whereas we're purchasing in the 1 to 2,000 lots at a time. So it is a challenge to be in that niche market, but we also are in, I always tell people, as blind people, we're probably in the best technological state of being that we've ever been in, right? We have, I was joking with my wife, who's also blind, and we were using the Be My AI feature to read my daughter's invitation card for a birthday party that she got invited to, right? And for those of you who have ever tried to read handwritten cards with OCR tools and things like that, it never is successful. And we pulled out our phone, opened up the card, snapped a picture, and we're able to understand not only the date, the time, who this is from, all the information, even the phone number to call, because it was handwritten. I looked at my wife and I said, what a world to be in right now. The fact that we as blind people are able to, with a cell phone, take a picture of a invitation card and be able to get a sense of what that says. It's always been a challenge. And I feel like today we're in a state where we have so many different tools at our disposal. So on the one hand, the mainstream is a challenge. On the other hand, it's a gift, right?
Absolutely. The AI, the new AI portion of Be My Eyes is amazing. I've been playing with that a lot.
Oh yeah.
And that's a topic for another webinar. But I'm going to preface the next several questions by saying that the reason why we at the Center for the Blind decided to have the professional mentor sessions is because we realized that there's a need for youngsters to have blind mentors working in the field, and there's a lot of blind youth who are, and sighted non-disabled youth as well, but a lot of blind youth who really don't have any idea what career they would like to do. And I think it's really important to just get the word out there and for them to meet successful blind people and learn how they do things. So with that in mind, the next question is, what are some of the blindness skills that led you to success in your job? or your career, actually?
It's a good question. There's a number of them. I really learned early on a multitude of screen readers. There's so many people that I hear say, "Oh, JAWS is the best," or NVDA is the best, and you have these folks who are screen reader fanboys or fangirls or fan people, and they don't look at what else is out there. On my desk, just to let you know, I've got a Windows laptop, I have an Android phone, I have an iOS phone, I've got a Mac. Um, Number one in my job, I have to test all of these different platforms for the things that we do. But I learned early on that to really be in the assistive tech space, I needed to be, I'm not going to be an expert. I'm not by far not an expert Mac user, but I know how to use it. I know how to use a Linux screen reader. I know how to use iOS and Android, right? To be in the role that I am, I have to at least have a baseline understanding of how these screen readers and environments work, along with their sort of their pitfalls, right? Where are they good? Where are they not good? And so early on, before I think it was even more popular to do so, I started learning all of these platforms as quickly as I could, and it gave me a sort of a leg up in that space to be able to work with our customers who may have been Mac users, and it allowed me in my technical support career, at least, to sort of become a go-to person that had multiple skill sets, that wasn't just the JAWS guy or the NVDA guy or you see what I'm saying? So being able to kind of diversify what I was able to do really helped there. The other thing is I really focused heavily on being much more or less travel averse. There was a time in my life when I was really nervous about traveling independently, and I, and I think this probably would get into one of your other questions, Dave, but when I was younger, I had a lot more vision, and I was the typical low vision kid that absolutely hated using my cane, that didn't want to look blind, that all of those things, right? So I really focused heavily in my career on building my confidence to travel independently. What that's allowed me to do is travel 100,000 miles on an airplane in a year, right? Like that's there's been years where I've traveled internationally, been able to travel to a number of different countries, and do that independently as a blind person. And it's allowed me to have experiences in my career that I don't think I ever would have had if I had let my fears sort of push back on that. And so I think that's a big piece of what skills I learned, was not only utilizing my cane to the full of potential that I could, but also having the confidence to be that blind person who was traveling, and to be able to know what techniques to use in an airport, when to get assistance, when it probably wouldn't be super advantageous to get assistance. So I think that was another big piece, is being able to utilize those travel skills and really hone them for air travel. Other than that, obviously Braille is key to what I do. So much of what I've done in my career has been really wrapped around Braille literacy, from the refreshable Braille displays to now today to the Monarch multi-line display. I read more Braille today than I probably ever have in my entire life. Some of that is related to being a blind parent who reads to sighted kids. I do a lot of reading of board books and things like that, to doing speeches and presentations and things like that as well. Being Braille literate allows me to do much more dynamic presentations than I ever was able to do with a headphone stuck in my ear listening to a screen reader. I can tell you that. And it's interesting because about half my career was spent presenting with a headphone in my ear in front of people, and half my career has been spent using a refreshable Braille display or Braille hard copy, and it is night and day the ability for me to stay focused in a presentation, for me to really ad lib when I need to, because I'm not so heavily focused on what the screen reader is saying. So I would say that Braille literacy, from a presentation and being able to present charismatically, was also a huge piece of the puzzle that I was definitely missing that first part of my career.
Thank you for sharing that. Why don't we hold off on the next question, and why don't you tell us about the Monarch, which I've heard referred to as a game changer, and other very impressive terms, like it's really has the potential of affecting education. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So it is a game changer. It's not just a gimmick. It is. So as blind people, we've always dreamt of this world where we could have multiple lines of Braille and graphics on the same surface. It's often been referred to as the Holy Braille, and that's ultimately what this is. It is a 10-line by 32 cell display, but the pins are equidistant spaced apart. And what that allows us to do is to create tactile graphics on the same surface that we create Braille labeling. And the exciting part about this is that, you know, APH has tried this in the past. We developed with Orbit Research about 10-ish years ago, 8 years ago, the graffiti tablet. And the graffiti tablet was an array of pins that were also equidistant apart, but they were essentially jumbo Braille pins that could raise up or lower. And it was really designed to be a tactile tablet, graphical tablet. And really where things weren't successful is, number one, it wasn't manufacturable at scale. But number two, we learned quickly that you can hand a blind person a graphic, but if there's no contextual information, if there's no Braille labels, if there's no other information that you provide to that person, they're never going to understand what that graphic is. And even today with the Monarch, we've done tests where we've given folks graphics with labels and graphics without labels, the exact same graphic, and they can instantly decipher what that graphic is if it's labeled. If it has, you know, I'm not saying the graphic, it tells you what it is, but it has, let's say, a map of the US and you have labels where the states would be, and then you have a map of the US where the labels would not be. The same graphic is instantly recognized by somebody if you have labels, and it's completely over their head if you don't. And so we realized quickly with the graffiti tablet that we need to have that Braille component to really make this a realistic tool. And so fast forward about 8 to 10 years, and that's where we are today. So the Monarch tablet has a Braille keyboard on it, so it is an input and output device. It has we've partnered with my old friends at Humanware on this one. So they are the manufacturer, we are the software and specification designer at APH, and we're equal partners in this project. We're using a new Braille cell technology from a South Korean company called DOT. And this is, for those of you who have ever seen the DOT watch, it's a very different technology that DOT's come up with since they developed the watch. So these Braille cells feel like traditional refreshable Braille cells. The pin height is identical to what you've expected from your piezoelectric cells that you use today in your refreshable Braille display. But they are exponentially smaller than the cells that you see in your refreshable Braille displays today, because those cells that you see today, the part that actually is revealed on your Braille display is really only about 60% of the cell. There's still another 40% of that Braille cell that goes back into your device that you don't see. And that's really what prevented us from ever developing a tactile array like we've done today, is because we couldn't stack these cells side by side or on top of each other to make this array, because there's a whole component that you don't see that would get in the way. And so this, the Monarch tablet comes with a lot of what I would call productivity tools for students in the classroom. So it'll come with a BRF reader, an editor, so that you can read BRF files as they are today. It comes with a tactile viewer application so that you can view tactile graphics that somebody sends you, or more importantly, because it has a Wi-Fi connection, APH has something called the Tactile Graphics Image Library that has over 18,000 graphics that is free and accessible to anybody who wants to access them today. And due to the connection through the Wi-Fi connection, we can actually access the TGIL, the Tactile Graphics Image Library, directly from the Monarch. And it's super simple to do. You can do a search for the US map, for example, and it'll give you all the results in the TGIL that are graphics that were created by tactile graphics artists, and you can press enter on the graphic that you want to look at, and it instantly pops up. And so for the first time ever, blind people have instant access to over 18,000 graphics that they would normally have to download the file, throw it on a thumb drive, go to a computer that's connected to an embosser, emboss that graphic, and then read it, right? Here, you just literally type in your search criteria, hit enter on it, and it pops up on your display. So what we've seen so far is what kind of game changer that is for students that have really been graphically starved. Is, you know, we've talked to a number of teachers of the visually impaired. The sort of the number that we keep hearing, the number of graphics that a teacher teaches, a teacher of the visually impaired teaches a year, so throughout an entire school year, is 25 graphics. Now, a sighted kid could walk into the classroom and be exposed to 25 graphical bits of representation within 10 seconds, probably, right? So blind students today don't have access to so much graphical content. And that's really one of the things that I'm incredibly excited about with the Monarch, is just seeing spatially how it changes the game for our blind students. There's so many blind students that have spatial orientation issues and challenges today, and getting exposed to more graphics with spatial concepts may help them develop that part of their mind's eye that is much more spatially oriented. So I'm really excited to see what happens there. The device also will come with a word processor, so the students can create or read their Microsoft Word documents and turn in their homework. It's going to have an email client, an internet browser. It will have a book reader, and that's really what we call our North Star at APH. Is today, when we at APH transcribe and produce a book, it can take anywhere from 7 to 13 months to produce that content, depending on whatever the content is. Obviously, if it's a pre-calculus book or a high-end chemistry book or something like that, it takes longer because there's more graphics, there's more scientific notation that has to be produced. In parallel to the Monarch, we're working with over 30 organizations around the world to create a new electronic Braille standard that we're calling the eBraille standard, or eBRF. And what this is a standard of basically keeping all of the great things that BRF has, which is spatial formatting produced by a Braille transcriber. But what we're doing is we're marking it up in the same fashion that a website gets marked up, or an EPUB book gets marked up, so that when you see that line that is centered in Braille, we also mark it as a heading, so that you can easily navigate a Braille file now, jumping in the same fashion that you're used to jumping in a DAISY book or in an EPUB file, where you go page by page, chapter by chapter, heading by heading. You have all that capabilities, but you still have the Braille formatting at your fingertips. And that's our goal with this project, is to basically make digital textbooks for students. So, the transcriber is still very much part of that equation. They're still doing the transcription. They're still providing the files. But ultimately, rather than basically sending this to the production floor, having it embossed, packaged, and then shipped free matter for the blind, which, let's be honest, doesn't always put us at the front of the bus. This will, the transcriber could finish a section of the book, hit the submit button, and then it gets basically populated to the teacher of the visually impaired, and the teacher of the visually impaired says, hey, we got your chapters 2 through 7 of your chemistry book instantaneously at that point. So, we're not saving all the time that the transcriber would have, but what we are saving is the production and shipping time, which still saves us oftentimes 2 to 3 months of development there. So the book reading is a big component, and that's a piece that we are taking to the federal government to advocate, to say, look, your job is to fund textbooks and curriculum for students. This is a student's textbook. And so we're looking for an additional significant amount of money for to basically fund this project, to be able to put a Monarch in the hands of as many blind students as we possibly can. And so and then the last one I'll talk about is a partnership that we have with the Desmos Graphing Calculator Company. So for those of you who've ever used them or heard of them, they provide a free online graphing calculator. What's exciting about this is that students could open up our Desmos Graphing Calculator application. You can type in Nemeth or UEB math, choose to graph that equation, and then actually see it graphed on your display. So a student could write, 3x squared plus 2x plus 7 equals y, and see that they've actually created a parabola instantaneously. You can see the x and y axes. You'd be able to see where your parabola, whether it goes up or down. And then because the Monarch has touch capability, you can actually double tap on the parabola. Let's just say you want to see where the maximum point of that parabola is. So you double tap on the top of the parabola, and it will actually read out the coordinates that you tapped on at that point. And so for the longest time, we've seen blind students doing math in the same way that I did it back when I was in school 20 plus years ago, which is using things like wiki sticks and braille graph paper to try to stick on these coordinates and points. And then by the time you turn it into the classroom teacher, most of that stuff has already fallen off the paper. And so, there's a number of functions on this, and the cool thing is that we've only touched the surface of this. Alongside developing this, we're also developing what's called a software development kit, and what that allows us to do is work with technology partners who also want to create Monarch apps for things that we haven't even thought of yet. So our goal with this is, yes, to create the device, but also to create a platform that other developers can build for.
Very powerful. I could see a teacher in a classroom having a lesson about, I don't know, geography, about the Great Lakes or something, and just being able to go online and pull up those images, which is really powerful. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it has a video out port as well, so you can connect to an HDMI source, plug it into a monitor, and the classroom teacher can see exactly what the blind student's doing at that point. So it's the blind kid is not just working on this mysterious device, but they can plug it into a monitor and the teacher can see what they're doing.
Well, all right, since we are at a professional mentor webinar, next question: who are some of your mentors, and how did they influence or motivate you?
It's, I saw that on your question list, Dave, and so I've got a few. So from my Humanware days, there's really two. There's, as I said, I did a number of things at Humanware. I worked with a sales VP who really took me under his wing. And one of the things that I appreciate, he's a sighted guy, Dominic Gagliano, and he was the sales rep for Wisconsin. So some of you may know him. Dominic was one of those guys that, and I talk like he's dead. No, he's alive. He's alive. I don't need to talk about he's in past tense. Dominic is one of those guys that he didn't care if, there's so many sighted people that are afraid to criticize a blind person in their presentation style, in their the way they work, and not criticize being a mean, but offer critiques in a professional development way, right? And Dominic was a guy that I really looked up to. He had been in the AT space for a long, long time and really cared. He started out as a salesperson. He was sales at his heart, but he cared deeply about the customers he worked with. And he really was so impactful in the way that he critiqued my presentations. He expected nothing but polish and preparedness, and he would let me know when I was screwing up. And it was what I needed to hear at that time. He was instrumental in making me use a refreshable braille display when I presented, because he basically was very blunt with me, saying that, look, you're losing the audience when you have to listen to that screen reader. You're losing the audience when you're pausing. And it was what I needed to hear, and it really helped me kind of hone my craft when I would present. He also was really instrumental in helping me to develop my presentation thoughts and the way that I actually presented from an agenda perspective, keeping talking points concise and things like that. So he was the first one. A product manager that I worked with, the director of product management at Humanware, her name was Lucia Gomez. She was, and she since has passed on, so I will talk about her in the past tense. But she was so instrumental in helping me to learn how to write a specification doc in the capacity that I needed to write it. So I needed to write specs for products, and I needed to convert the needs of the users to specifications that programmers could understand. And she was, I remember sending her a spec doc early in my career, and it coming back with more red on it, red meaning like negative comments that she put on there and corrections, than I think actual text that I had written, right? And I needed to understand how to word these things, how to be concise, how to tell stories for the programmers to really understand, because the programmers aren't seeing the blind students working with these products in the classroom. They're not seeing the needs of the kids. So I have to be that messenger that really speaks on behalf of our users. And she was really crucial in really building this fall in love with the problem mentality that I still adopt today. And I would say, from a person who really helped me to adopt blindness as part of my identity, which is, I'd say, as crucial as anything that I've talked about today. I had my first internship was at the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and I was working in the IT department as an intern for a year. And the superintendent, or the director of WCBVI at the time, was Mark Riccobono, and I had a chance to really get to know Mark a lot there. And Mark really sort of helped me to understand a lot about adopting blindness into my identity, and really got me outside my comfort zone. I remember many stories that, we can talk about. Mark he taught me how to, my parents never let me use a grill before, and Mark got me, and I'll throw a shout out to Dave Hyde. Dave Hyde was there when we grilled as well. So, taught me how to do some of these techniques for things that I never thought that I'd be able to do. Mark taught me how to shoot fireworks off. So, these are those type of experiences that, as a blind person, you just kind of told, now you can't do that. That's dangerous. That's this. And then you see these other blind people, and they're like, no, it's not dangerous. You have to be careful. You have to know the right techniques. You have to do X, Y, Z, but yeah, you can do it. And I look at it today, and my wife and I are both blind, and we have sighted kids, and I very much echo the sentiment that you don't have to learn how to do everything on your own. You don't have to reinvent the wheel because there's blind people who have done it before. We rely so heavily on the blind parents groups to learn how to do different things. All, from identifying rashes on your kids to, a number of different things. Today, my daughter's 7, and, I'm learning how to help her learn to read because I can't read alongside her. So there's a number of parents that have so many suggestions to, well, I use this tool with my kids and it works really well, or this is an accessible iPad app that we can work together on. These are the type of, I mentioned before, it's a great opportunity to be a blind person from a technology perspective, because we're, say what you want about social media, some of the really good benefits is it does connect you to folks who are kind of in the same boat as you are in some situations. And so, yeah, so Mark Riccobono was the third. I had the pleasure of working with him as an intern when he was overseeing the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. I got to spend a lot of time with him, which was fantastic.
All right. It's 4:18, so hopefully we have a few minutes for questions at the end. There's 2 more questions, and I think I heard some answers from the next question, which is my favorite, which is, looking back to when you were high school age, what would you tell yourself, or what might you have done differently?
I would have told myself that it's okay to be a blind person. That's what I would have told myself. I spent so much time hiding that I couldn't see that I think I expelled more effort trying to hide it than not hide it, and it's a pretty cool character trait, I'll be honest with you. And if I would have adopted that mentality earlier, I can tell you that from a education perspective, from a social perspective, I probably would have been better off early on. But I think because it took longer, I had to learn a lot of those skill sets, a lot of the confidence. I had to learn a lot of that later in life than I probably would have had to do. But, teenagers, Dave, are not always the most open to new ideas. So,
Right.
but yeah, that's what I would have told myself.
And I was in the same boat with you, having partial vision and not having that identity.
Yeah, but you know what? To no detriment to my TVIs, because I'll tell you, my TVIs and parents, they're the ones that said, it would have been real easy for TVIs to throw me under a CCTV and call it good enough. But I had some amazing TVIs here in Wisconsin that really advocated for me being a dual learner, both low vision and Braille. I learned Braille when I was 4 or 5 years old, so I still look back on that and say, wow, I see these kids today who are low vision. They will lose their vision and they're stuck under a CCTV and that's it. And I'm just like, man, that is the biggest detriment you can do for that kid.
Yeah. Awesome. Last question. What is the most important advice you can share with young job seekers?
Diversify your skill set. Try a bunch of stuff. I used to think that I knew what I wanted to do in college, and I was lucky enough when I was in Whitewater they had I think today it's I don't know the name of the degree that it is today, but back then it was called Computer and User Technology. I started off as a programmer, thought I'm going to be a programmer, and then I realized I absolutely hated programming and I was awful at it. So I went where all of the programming rejects went, which was Computer and User Technology, and I'm so glad that I did that, because Computer and User Technology at UW Whitewater was a combination of business and IT. So I learned all the IT stuff, but I also learned things like marketing, things like accounting, which I still hate, finance, web design. I learned a lot of these different skill sets that today, I hardly ever use my IT background anymore. I'm not building out servers or anything like that. I understand IT concepts, but most importantly, I understand business concepts. I understand how to calculate a margin, or I understand how to look at a profit and loss thing that I wouldn't have done had I just gone straight into programming. And so diversifying what you want to do, and then when you do find something that you're excited about, I am like super into researching everything that I can possibly do, right? My wife always laughs at me about that because she's like, when you get a project, you are all about that project. And so I look into the accessibility challenges of doing X, Y, or Z. I look into the different tools that you can do to if you want to be a web designer, for example, or if you want to be a product manager or whatever. But last thing I'd say is, if you can, find a blind person who's doing that job, because they'll tell you what you need to know. They'll tell you what has worked for them and what hasn't. I've been lucky enough to work with some blind product managers in the field that, at a conference, I'll say, hey, let's go grab a drink or grab a coffee or whatever, and just pick their brain. And most of the time, people are pretty open to sharing some of their successes, because quite honestly, we've all had to ask those questions to somebody else in the past as well. So, it's not a secret. It's just something that, if you ask us, or if you're interested, yeah, we'll tell our story. Absolutely.
Perfect. Kay, do we want to open up the microphones, and is there anything in the chat?
There is nothing in the chat, so I could unmute. Looks like I have to, hold on a second. I guess I will just unmute everyone.
Yeah, I think that's, yep.
Your mute command.
It sounded like she was successful, so
Hear me?
yes, does anybody have questions?
Well, I just wanted to say that I appreciate that that you, Greg, are user of multiple different types of devices like Mac and Windows and Android and iOS. I actually use all of those. I use all of them too. I have I'm primarily an Apple user, so like I said, I'm appreciating that you are using a Mac as well as a PC. But I used to be a Windows user until last year, so I have some older Windows PCs, and then I have an iPhone and an Android phone. So I like exploring with the different types of like the iOS versus Android, and like what accessibility features on each device and stuff like that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Bryce. It's something that, the landscape changes so quickly these days. So, if you don't keep up with it every year, you're going to miss out on, maybe all of a sudden Android comes out with some really innovative accessibility feature, or they're doing something really cool with their screen reader. So, yeah, keep that up, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I also thought the Monarch tablet was cool. I use Mantis for school and stuff right now, but
Awesome.
I had heard that had now been handed over to Humanware for updates and things.
No, it's still an APH product. It's we're working, so we work with Humanware. They're our manufacturer for that, and then we work with them on the software updates that are going to be coming. So they distribute it, but we work with them on the specifications that go to it.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I heard, and I wasn't sure because I thought it was an APH product, but I wasn't really sure.
It's a joint product. Yep.
All right. And yeah, it's cool. I'd love to be able to see tactile graphics and things on like a refreshable kind of braille display. I think that tablet sounds really cool.
It is absolutely. It's something that a lot of folks have never even encountered before. So it's pretty exciting. We're hoping to have it available and put on quota funds here by the end of the year.
That's cool.
Do we have any
Dave.
other questions out there?
Dave, I wasn't able to unmute people. It doesn't look like Bryce seemed to do that himself. So, does anybody else have a question? And I will keep trying to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. It like it never muted. Like I was muted on my end, but it never actually muted me from it was like my camera was disabled, but it didn't say that my mic was disabled.
Okay. So does anybody else have a question? And maybe you can try and we'll
I
see. Maybe you
wonder,
got power.
maybe if they raise their hand, can you then call on them or something? Would that unmute, or I don't know.
Nobody has raised their hand. If somebody wants to
Feel
just,
free to type questions in the chat also. One question I did not ask you, Greg, when we plan these, are you okay with me sharing your contact info with participants if they would like to get a hold of you somehow?
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do my APH address there.
Okay.
Two participants left the call.
Oh. Well, we're going to have to figure out that glitch for the next one.
Dave, this is Chelsea. I have Michael here. You can hear us. He has a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Michael.
Hello. So, how much are you looking at, like, for the Monarchs? How much would they like cost? I know it would probably be a lot, but I'm just wondering.
It is a lot. The sticker shock is real. So basically, as I mentioned, that's really the foundation for why we are speaking to the federal government, because it's not something that, you know, one student is gonna be able to get. It's gonna range anywhere from $14,000 to $20,000 depending on what we're looking at. So it's an extremely expensive technology. We know that. That's sort of the nature of being the first one to ever do this. Having said that, we're looking for an additional $10 million that would be dedicated to students getting Monarchs in their hands. So our goal with this is, and we've had good traction. We received an additional $1.5 million from the federal government to APH last year to test the devices in 100 classrooms. So that's a good sign, because oftentimes the federal government won't give you money if they don't think that what you're doing is valuable, but they gave us 1.5, which is great. And then we're continuing to advocate for an additional $10 million going forward. So our goal is that the Monarch doesn't pull from your federal quota funds that you already get. It would be a separate pot of money. So we know that if we just rely on quota, states like Wisconsin, for example, which get far less quota funds than, say, California, you know, a few Monarchs would suck up a lot of those funds. And so our goal here is that we create sort of a separate textbook Monarch fund from the federal government that would fund these devices.
Yeah, that's really neat. I'm just glad that we're finally getting to the point where there's going to be tactile graphics that are not those thermoforms that I cannot stand.
Amen.
So difficult to read.
Yeah, they're super good in the heat, in the humidity, where your fingers just stick to the thermoform. It's fantastic.
The braille or the drawing.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Also, Greg, it's an honor to talk to you. I've watched your videos, and I've always been, you've taught everything so well, and just like the way you explain things is great, and I really look up to you. So thank you for doing this webinar. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, man. Absolutely. I like I said, I learned early on that I didn't feel like I had a knack for teaching, but I'm glad the videos and stuff have been super helpful. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Great to hear from you.
Hey, you as well.
Hey, Greg, Cheryl here. I just wanted to say nice job, and we're looking forward at able to getting our hands on one of those Monarchs. And, you know, we can do 25 tactiles for an assignment. And, wow, to cut down on that embossing time and putting things in the mail, we just can't wait.
Yeah, it's
So-
it is going to change things really quickly.
And we gave up on that thermoform machine years ago after, you know, so many complaints of working with those plastic pages.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
remember in elementary school, I'd go in the morning and my teacher was blind. It would be at thermoform machine, and now you guys stand back. You know, it got very hot, and
Yep. Yep. Like I said, things haven't changed a lot, Dave. It's we still have kids and what's funny is I don't know, and you guys may. I don't know many blind people who actually enjoy the thermoforms.
Yeah, no, I either.
No, I think it was Dave Hyde who always said, you could read in the bathtub if you wanted to, or if it gets dirty, you could put it in the dishwasher.
Throw it in the dishwasher. Yeah, it sounds like a Dave Hyde thing.
I really want to thank you, Greg. This was great. Thank you for sharing your info and inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And don't hesitate if you all have questions or anything like that. Like I said, happy to talk through my story, and if it helps any of you, that's fantastic.